2,000 years ago, a group of people knew something so dangerous, so threatening to the emerging power structures of the ancient world, that those in power did everything they could to erase it. They burned the texts, they persecuted the communities, they declared the teachings heretical, they rewrote history to make it appear as though these people had never existed, or if they had, that they were dangerous heretics whose ideas deserved to be forgotten. But the ideas survived, not in institutions, not in official doctrine, but hidden in plain sight, in the symbols embedded in art and architecture, in the metaphors woven into literature, in the esoteric layers of the very religious texts that were used to suppress them. Tonight, we are going to find them. We are going to explore the secret at the heart of the Gnostic tradition, one of the most extraordinary and most suppressed wisdom movements in the history of human civilization. We are going to look at what the Gnostics actually believed, not the caricature presented by their enemies, but the actual teaching as recovered from their own texts. We are going to examine why this teaching was so threatening, that it had to be destroyed. And we are going to ask what this ancient secret means for you right now, in this moment. Because the Gnostic secret is not just history. It is not just an interesting chapter in the story of early Christianity. It is a living teaching that speaks directly to the condition of every human being who has ever felt that there is something more, something hidden beneath the surface of ordinary life, something that the official story of reality has left out. If you have ever felt that, then you have felt the Gnostic impulse. And tonight, we are going to follow it all the way to its source. Let us begin with the question: what do you think the Gnostics believed? If you have heard of them at all, you may have heard that they believed the physical world was evil, created by a malevolent or incompetent deity, and that salvation consisted of escaping from matter into a purely spiritual realm. This is the caricature, and like most caricatures, it contains just enough truth to be misleading. Yes, the Gnostics had a complex and sophisticated understanding of the relationship between the material and spiritual dimensions of reality. Yes, many Gnostic schools viewed the material world as a kind of trap, or a prison, or a place of forgetting. But the deeper teaching, the secret beneath the surface of all of it, was not about escape. It was about recognition. The recognition of what you actually are. The word gnosis means direct knowledge, not faith, not belief, not doctrine. Direct, personal, experiential knowledge. The Gnostics were not primarily interested in what you believed about God. They were interested in whether you had directly encountered the divine within yourself, because they taught with extraordinary consistency across all the different schools and texts of the Gnostic movement that the divine is not primarily outside. It is inside, not metaphorically, actually. At the very core of every human being, there is a spark of the original divine light, not a connection to the divine, not a reflection of the divine. The divine itself, the actual substance of the infinite, compressed into the form of an individual human being, and temporarily, through the circumstances of material existence, forgotten. This is the Gnostic secret. Not that the world is evil, not that matter is a prison, but that you are divine, and that you have forgotten, and that the entire purpose of the Gnostic path is to remember, to wake up, to recognize what was always already true. Let me give you some context for understanding this. Context that is rarely presented in mainstream discussions of Gnosticism. The Gnostic movement emerged in the first few centuries of the Common Era, in the extraordinary cultural melting pot of the ancient Mediterranean world. Alexandria, Antioch, Rome, cities where Egyptian wisdom, Greek philosophy, Jewish scripture, Persian mysticism, and the new movement of Christianity were all in constant dialogue and exchange. The Gnostics were not a single unified movement. They were a diverse and creative collection of teachers, communities, and texts, united by certain core insights, but varying enormously in their specific cosmologies and practices. Some Gnostic schools were closely connected to Christianity, drawing on the figure of Jesus, but interpreting his teaching in ways that were radically different from what was becoming the official church. Others drew more heavily on Egyptian sources, or on Platonic philosophy, or on the Jewish mystical tradition of the Kabbalah. But across all of this diversity, certain themes recur with remarkable consistency. The idea that the human being contains within itself a divine spark, a fragment of the original light of the infinite, that has become trapped in matter. The idea that the ordinary world, the world of appearances and social conventions and material concerns, is not the deepest reality. That there is something more, something hidden beneath the surface, that can be directly known. The idea that this knowing, this gnosis, is the path of liberation, not belief, not ritual, not moral conduct, though all of these have their place, but direct knowledge of what you actually are. Let me take you into one of the most important Gnostic texts that survives, the Gospel of Thomas, discovered in 1945 at Nag Hammadi in Egypt, along with a collection of other Gnostic texts. The Gospel of Thomas is not a narrative gospel. It does not tell a story. It is a collection of 114 sayings attributed to Jesus, many of which have no parallel in the canonical Gospels. And these sayings are extraordinary. They read like koans, like direct pointers to something that cannot be said directly, but can be indicated, invited, pointed at, until the reader's own recognition completes the transmission. Jesus says in the Gospel of Thomas, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you." Read that again. Not what is within a church, not what is within a scripture, what is within you, the divine spark, the original light, the awareness that was never born and will never die. If you bring it forth, if you recognize it, embody it, live from it, it will save you, not from hell after death, from the smaller death of living an unawakened life, from the prison of the false self that mistakes the costume for the being. The Gospel of Thomas also contains this remarkable saying, "The kingdom of God is spread out upon the earth, and men do not see it, not in heaven, not in some future time, spread out upon the earth, right here, right now, everywhere, and men do not see it, not because it is hidden, but because they are not looking with the right eyes." The eyes of gnosis, the eyes of direct recognition. This is the Gnostic secret, not an esoteric doctrine accessible only to the initiated few, but a direct and practical teaching. The divine is here. It is in you. It is everywhere, and you will see it the moment you develop the eyes to see it. Now let us look at another dimension of the Gnostic teaching, one that I think is particularly important for understanding why it was so threatening to the emerging institutional church. The Gnostic understanding of the relationship between the individual and God was radically non-hierarchical. In the Gnostic view, you do not need an intermediary to access the divine. You do not need a priest. You do not need a church. You do not need a sacrament. You do not need to belong to the right institution, or hold the right beliefs, or follow the right rules. The divine is directly accessible to every human being at any moment, through the faculty of direct inner knowing, through gnosis. This was not just a theological position, it was an existential threat to the entire project of institutional religion. Because if every human being has direct access to the divine through their own inner knowing, then what is the role of the institution? What is the role of the priest? What is the role of the doctrine? What is the role of the authority that says you must come through us to reach what is already within you? The institutional church understood this threat clearly, and it responded accordingly. The Gnostic texts were declared heretical. The Gnostic communities were persecuted. The Gnostic teachers were killed, and the official history was written by those who survived, but the texts survived too, hidden in clay jars in the Egyptian desert for nearly 2,000 years, until they were found by a farmer in 1945 and returned to the world as if the tradition itself had been waiting for a moment when humanity was ready to hear what it had to say. Let me explore with you the Gnostic understanding of the archons. This is one of the most distinctive and one of the most misunderstood aspects of the Gnostic cosmology. The archons are described as the rulers, the administrators of the material world, not as demons in the conventional sense, but as forces, structures, patterns that maintain the ordinary world of appearances and that resist the awakening of the divine spark within human beings. Now, there are many ways to interpret this teaching. On a literal cosmological level, the archons are supernatural beings who govern the material realm and who actively work to prevent human liberation. But on a psychological level, which I think is the more useful interpretation for our purposes, the archons are the internalized voices of limitation, the beliefs, the assumptions, the cultural conditioning that tell you that you are small, that you are separate, that you are not worthy of direct contact with the divine, that you need to go through external authorities to access what is already within you, the archon of fear that keeps you small and compliant, the archon of shame that tells you that you are fundamentally flawed, the archon of ignorance that mistakes the costume for the being and the appearance for the reality. These are the forces that the Gnostic path is designed to overcome, not through rebellion or confrontation, but through recognition, because an archon that is recognized loses its power. You cannot be controlled by a belief that you can see clearly as a belief. You cannot be imprisoned by a story that you recognize as a story. The moment of gnosis, the moment of direct recognition of what you actually are, is the moment the archons lose their grip, not because they disappear, but because you are no longer operating from within their framework. You are seeing from a vantage point that they cannot reach. This is the Gnostic liberation, not an escape from the world, but a recognition of what lies beneath the world and within you that cannot be controlled by any worldly power. Let me bring this teaching into the present moment, right now, in your life. What are the archons? What are the voices, the beliefs, the assumptions that keep you from recognizing the divine spark within you? The voice that says you are not spiritual enough. The voice that says you have too much baggage. The voice that says awakening is for other people, for people with more time, more discipline, more natural ability. The voice that says just keep your head down and get through the day. These are the archons, and the Gnostic teaching says see them, not with contempt or hostility, but with clear and compassionate recognition. See them for what they are: patterns of conditioning, stories that were absorbed before you were old enough to evaluate them, voices that are not the voice of your deepest nature, but of the world's attempt to keep you within manageable limits. And in that seeing, begin to find the space between the voice and the awareness that hears it. Because you are not the voice, you are the awareness that hears it. And that awareness is the divine spark, right here, right now, already free, already whole, already exactly what the Gnostics were pointing at. Before we close, I want to offer you a practice drawn directly from the Gnostic tradition. It is called the practice of self-inquiry. Find a quiet place, sit comfortably and close your eyes. Take a few slow breaths, and then ask yourself, simply and directly, who am I? Not as an intellectual question, as a genuine inquiry. Who is it that is asking? Who is it that is aware of the thoughts arising? Who is it that is hearing these words? Do not answer with words. Do not reach for concepts. Just look. Look at what is looking. Turn the attention around and see what is there. Before any label, before any story, before any concept. What you find in that turning is the divine spark, the awareness that is aware, the knowing that knows, the light that illuminates every experience, but without itself being an experience. This is what the Gnostics called the pneuma, the spirit, the breath of the divine that animates every human being. And it is right here, not elsewhere, not in the future, not after sufficient spiritual practice. Here, now. Waiting only for your recognition. Subscribe to Sacred Flame. Because this exploration continues, video by video, we are uncovering the hidden teachings that were suppressed for 2,000 years and making them available to everyone who is ready to receive them. Until next time, ask the question, look at what is looking, and remember, the secret the Gnostics were protecting was never a secret about the world. It was a secret about you, and now you know it. There is something I want to explore more deeply, a dimension of the Gnostic teaching that I think is one of its most radical and most beautiful aspects, the Gnostic understanding of what Jesus was actually teaching. Now, I want to be careful here. I'm not making claims about theology. I'm not saying that the Gnostic interpretation is correct and the Orthodox interpretation is wrong. What I'm saying is that the Gnostic texts present a vision of Jesus' teaching that is extraordinarily sophisticated, and that has profound implications for how we understand the spiritual path. In the Orthodox Christian tradition, Jesus is primarily understood as a saviour, a divine being who came from outside to rescue human beings from their fallen condition. The human being is fundamentally broken, fundamentally sinful, and salvation comes from outside from the grace of a divine figure who did what human beings could not do for themselves. This is a coherent and meaningful teaching, and it has brought genuine comfort and transformation to billions of people over 2,000 years. But the Gnostic texts present something different. In the Gnostic understanding, Jesus was primarily a teacher of Gnosis, a human being who had fully recognized the divine spark within himself, and who came to help others do the same. His role was not to do something for you that you could not do yourself. His role was to show you what you already are, to point at the divine spark and say, this is what you are, this is what I am, we are the same. In the Gospel of Philip, one of the Nag Hammadi texts, Jesus says, you saw the Spirit, you became Spirit. You saw Christ, you became Christ. You saw the Father, you shall become Father. You saw each other, you saw yourselves. In other words, the recognition of the divine in Jesus is simultaneously the recognition of the divine in yourself. Because the divine spark in Jesus and the divine spark in you are the same spark, the same light, the same infinite awareness, temporarily taking different forms. This is not a comfortable teaching. It does not allow for the comfortable distance of worshipping something entirely other than yourself. It demands something more difficult. The recognition that what you are worshipping is what you are. The Gnostic Jesus does not say, believe in me. He says, know yourself. Know what you actually are. And in that knowing, you will know everything you need to know. This is why the institutional church found the Gnostic teaching so threatening, because it shifted the locus of authority from the institution to the individual, from the church to the divine spark within, from the priest to the practitioner, and an institution whose power depends on being the necessary intermediary between humanity and the divine, cannot survive the widespread recognition that no intermediary is necessary. Let me take you deeper into the Gnostic understanding of the fall and what it actually means. In the Orthodox tradition, the fall is a historical event. Adam and Eve, the garden, the serpent, the forbidden fruit, and the result of this event is that human beings are cut off from God, fallen, broken, in need of redemption. In the Gnostic understanding, the fall is not primarily a historical event. It is a description of a condition, the condition of forgetting, the divine spark, which is the essential nature of every human being, has become so identified with its material form, so absorbed in the experience of being a body in a physical world, that it has forgotten what it actually is. This is not punishment. It is not the result of sin. It is simply what happens when infinite consciousness takes on a finite form. The finite form becomes so vivid, so immediate, so all-consuming that the infinite ground from which it emerges temporarily disappears from view, like a dreamer who is so absorbed in the dream that they forget they are dreaming. The fall is the forgetting, and gnosis, the direct knowledge of what you actually are, is the remembering, the awakening within the dream, the recognition that even as you are experiencing this particular life, in this particular body, in this particular moment, you are also simultaneously the infinite awareness in which this entire experience is arising, the dreamer and the dream, the ocean and the wave, the fire and the spark, both at once. This recognition, this direct and lived experience of being both finite and infinite simultaneously, is what the Gnostics called the resurrection. Not a bodily resurrection after physical death, but a resurrection of awareness within this life, within this body, right now. The dead, in the Gnostic understanding, are not those who have stopped breathing. They are those who have not yet recognized the divine spark within them, who are still entirely identified with the limited self, who are still asleep within the dream, unaware that they are dreaming. And the resurrection is the waking up, the recognition, the gnosis. Jesus says in the Gospel of Thomas, "Blessed is the one who existed before coming into being. If you become my disciples and listen to my words, these stones will minister to you, for you have 5 trees in paradise that do not move in summer or winter, and their leaves do not fall. Whoever knows them will not taste death. The one who knows them will not taste death, not because they will live forever in a physical body, but because they will recognize that what they actually are was never born and will never die. The awareness that knows is prior to the body that will decay, prior to the mind that will forget, prior to the personality that will dissolve. And in recognizing this, in directly knowing this, something fundamental shifts. Not the circumstances of life, not the inevitable difficulties and losses, but the relationship to all of it. Because you know, in the deepest sense of knowing, that what you are cannot be touched by any of it. Let me offer you something now that I think will make all of this more concrete, because I'm aware that we have been moving through some very abstract territory. And I want to bring it back to the immediate, to the practical, to what is actually available right now. The Gnostic teachers were not primarily interested in cosmology. They were not primarily interested in elaborate systems of divine emanations and archons and aeons, though they used these concepts to describe what they were pointing at. They were interested in one thing: direct experience, the actual encounter with the divine spark within. And every elaborate cosmological system, every symbolic story, every paradoxical saying was pointing at that one thing. Come and see for yourself, not believe this doctrine, not accept this cosmology. Come and see for yourself. Look at what you actually are. And right now, in this moment, you can do exactly that. Without any doctrine, without any cosmology, without any intermediary, simply by looking. Close your eyes for a moment, take one slow breath, and ask yourself, what is it that is aware right now? Not what am I thinking, not what am I feeling. What is aware of all of this? What is the knowing that knows? You will find, if you look carefully, that you cannot find a boundary to it, that it is not located in a particular place, that it is simply present, open, aware. This presence, this openness, this awareness, this is the divine spark, right here, not hidden, not requiring special conditions, not accessible only to the spiritually advanced, here, now, always. This is what the Gnostics knew. This is what they protected and transmitted, and eventually buried in clay jars in the desert, trusting that one day the world would be ready to receive it again. That day is now. Subscribe to Sacred Flame, because this exploration continues. We are uncovering what was hidden, video by video, layer by layer, until the full teaching is revealed. Until next time, look at what is looking, know what knows, and remember the secret hidden in plain sight for 2,000 years was never about what is outside you. It was always about what is within, and what is within is everything. There is one more aspect of the Gnostic tradition that I want to explore with you tonight, an aspect that is rarely discussed, but that I think is perhaps the most important of all, the Gnostic understanding of love. Because there is a common misconception that the Gnostic path is cold, intellectual, detached, purely about knowledge. That Gnosis is a dry and cerebral affair for people who prefer philosophy to feeling. This is completely wrong. The highest expression of the Gnostic path, in every school, in every text, in every tradition that touches on this wisdom, is love. Not sentimental love, not romantic love. Though these are reflections of it, but the love that arises naturally. When the boundaries of the separate self begin to dissolve, when you recognize that the awareness looking out through your eyes is the same awareness looking out through every other pair of eyes, when the apparent separateness that keeps you in a defended relationship with the world begins to thin and soften, what arises in that thinning is not indifference, it is not detachment, it is love. The love that the Sufi tradition calls ishq, the burning love of the mystic for the divine, the love that the Christian mystical tradition calls agape, the unconditional love that is the very nature of God, the love that the Vedic tradition calls bhakti, the devotion that arises when the heart recognizes the divine in all things. This love is not something you cultivate or manufacture. It is what naturally emerges when the barriers that block it dissolve. And the Gnostic teaching, with its emphasis on the direct recognition of the divine spark, is ultimately a teaching about dissolving those barriers, not through effort or discipline, but through recognition. The moment you see, really see, the divine spark in another person, love is the natural response, not because you decided to love them, not because they met your requirements or fulfilled your needs, but because what you are seeing in them is what you are. And how can you not love what you are? The Gnostic Gospel of Philip says, light and darkness, life and death, right and left, are brothers of one another. It is not possible to separate them from one another. Because of this, neither are the good good, nor the evil evil, nor is life life, nor death death. On the surface, this sounds strange, even disturbing, but what it is pointing at is the recognition that in the deepest reality, there is no fundamental separation, not between light and dark, not between self and other, not between human and divine. The apparent opposites, the apparent conflicts, the apparent separations are real at the level of ordinary experience. But beneath that level, they are movements within a single undivided whole. And the recognition of that wholeness is the source of the love that the Gnostic path, in its deepest expression, is pointing toward. Not the love that chooses its objects carefully and withdraws when they disappoint, but the love that has no object, because it is the very nature of awareness itself, the love that is not produced by circumstances, but that is the ground of all circumstances. This is what the Gnostics were protecting, not a cosmological system, not a collection of secret rituals, the knowledge that love, in its deepest and most unconditional form, is what you actually are, and that every experience of genuine love, every moment when the barriers soften and the heart opens and the sense of separation dissolves, is a moment of gnosis, a moment of direct knowledge of your own divine nature. Let me close with something that I think brings all of this together. The Gnostic Gospel of Thomas contains this saying. Jesus said, "I am the light that is over all things. I am all. From me all came forth, and to me all attained. Split a piece of wood, I am there. Lift up the stone, and you will find me there. Split a piece of wood, I am there. Lift up the stone, and you will find me there. Not in heaven, not in a church, not in a doctrine, in the wood, in the stone, in the most ordinary and unremarkable materials of ordinary life. The divine is not elsewhere, it is here, in the wood and the stone, in the breath and the heartbeat, in the awareness that is right now receiving these words. The secret hidden in plain sight for 2,000 years is not hidden at all. It is the most obvious thing in the world. So obvious that it is almost impossible to see, because we are always looking past it, looking for something more exotic, more distant, more dramatic than the simple and undeniable presence of awareness itself, right here, right now, just this. Subscribe to Sacred Flame. Because this exploration continues, we are following the thread that the Gnostics left for us, through the hidden layers of the tradition, through the suppressed texts, through the symbols embedded in art and architecture, through the direct experience that has been available to every human being in every moment since the very beginning. Until next time, split the wood, lift the stone, and find what has been waiting there. All along, I want to leave you with one final reflection, one that brings the entire Gnostic teaching into your own life, right now, today. The Gnostic tradition teaches that the divine spark is not equally accessible in all conditions, not because some people are more worthy than others, but because certain conditions make the recognition easier, and certain conditions make it harder. The conditions that make it harder are the conditions of distraction, noise, fragmentation, the conditions of a life lived entirely on the surface, without any depth, without any stillness, without any genuine inquiry. The conditions that make it easier are the conditions of stillness, of simplicity, of genuine seeking, the willingness to stop, to be quiet, to turn inward, to ask the real questions. Not, what should I do today? But what am I? Not, how do I succeed in the world? But what is this world I am moving through? Not, how do I get what I want? But who is it that wants? These are the Gnostic questions, and they are available to you in any moment, in any circumstances, without any special preparation or qualification. The only requirement is the willingness to actually ask, to actually look, to actually sit with the not knowing. That arises when you stop reaching for the familiar answers and wait for something deeper to emerge. This waiting, this genuine and patient inquiry is itself the beginning of Gnosis, because Gnosis doesn't arrive as the result of accumulating the right information. It arrives in the space created by genuine questioning, in the gap between the question and the answer, in the moment when the ordinary mind, exhausted by its own reaching, finally falls quiet, and in that quiet, what was always already there simply becomes visible. The Gnostic secret, hidden in plain sight for 2,000 years, is not a secret at all. It is the most obvious thing in existence, so obvious that it is almost impossible to see. The awareness that is right now reading these words, the presence that is right now experiencing this moment, the knowing that knows without itself being known. This is it. This is the divine spark. This is what the Gnostics risked everything to protect and transmit. Not a doctrine, not a cosmology, not a ritual. Just this, the simple, undeniable, inexhaustible presence of awareness itself, right here, in you, as you, always. Subscribe to Sacred Flame, because the hidden teachings are being revealed, video by video, layer by layer. We are following the thread all the way to its source. Until next time, be still, look, and find what has been waiting for you. In the wood, in the stone, in the breath, in the awareness. That is right now. Reading these words.